Hello, this is Real World Audio, and today we are going into details. I have shown a couple of videos on my Vangelis albums and spoke a few words about them. And the point was to show the vast diversity of what Vangelis has produced. But to tell the truth, the ones that I have shown you are not at all his complete series. He has done much more, and I will going to introduce you many more albums which I have not introduced. But today I'm going to do something much more. I'm going deeper into 3 albums because I mentioned them, but I didn't really tell anything in depth about either of those albums. So now I'm going to rectify that that situation, and I just listened to these 3 albums, and it was a very painful experience to stop listening to it and start shooting this video. I really didn't want that to happen, and I was just absorbed in music, and ultimately I could make the choice because the record ended and I had to get out of the sofa and do something about it. So here we go with great sadness, because I'm not continuing listening to them and just yapping here. Here it comes, the spiraling short story of a private collection, which is the amalgam of these 3 albums: Vangelis' Spiral, his short stories, and his private collection. And now this is going to be a little bit unusual description of albums, because people always want to say that, oh, how great it sounds, and LP is so much better than CD, and etc, etc, yabba yabba. However, I'm going to show you the good and the bad. So today, and also show you the process, that when you have a system, which I would call such a system that is capable of translating music to you. When you listen to music, you do not think about, oh, okay, I need better bass or whatever these aspects, but you get so absorbed into the music that you cannot even contain yourself. For example, I just tell about this album, because this was the point when I really felt I have to start shooting this video. And when I was about to get up from the couch to stop the music, to shout the video, that action of me wanting to stand up became an emotional trauma, and I was unable to stand up from the couch, and my throat constricted like I am about to cry. And I didn't want to cry, of course, but just the mere thought of stopping the music caused a trauma in the body. And I know it sounds totally nuts, but I think there are some people who can report things like that. If you listen to Larry at Real Hi-Fi Help, I think he has some experiences that can relate to this experience of mine. But can I say that every time I put on a record is like that? Absolutely not. And this is why now this review is like the spiraling short story of a private collection, because I'm giving you the beautiful side, the realistic side, the incredible side, and the ugly side of it as well, because I started listening to the private collection. So after I got home, I turned on the system, so flipped on the power amps, flipped on the phono stage, and right away put it in. So I didn't let it warm up at all. So as it was that cold, I started playing music. Well, it's not that cold, because as you know, my power amps I rigged in a way that the heaters of the tubes are always on. So essentially it's just the high voltage and the plates that has to stabilize to warm up. So it means that it takes about 2 hours for it to warm up. And if you have a regular amp where you have like a dead cold start, then it takes usually around 4 or 5 hours for an amplifier to reach optimum sound. And that's not just true for this amp, it's true for every amp of high quality. And that's the sad fact. The better your amp is, the more you will feel the effect of warming it up properly. And sometimes the warm-up can be quite drastic. For example, for my single-ended amp, because it has that just unbelievably humongous power supply compared to the amp. Just imagine a 1.2 watt per channel amp with a 500 watt capacity power supply. So that monster, if for example, if I have that amp turned off for a month and then I turn it on, it requires over 30 hours to warm up. So that's about warm-up time. So I started the warm-up today with private collection, and it was an atrocious experience. So first of all, I was just stunned because the EQ was not real. And I was like, well, how is this possible? This is not RIAA curve. And luckily on my phono stage I can choose the real curves. And guess what? The real curve that this album plays at is that curve that was used at the very early era of stereo recordings. What most mono recordings are, I would say not even most mono, but the earlier monos are using that curve. I was like totally scratching my head like, what on earth is going on here? And then on top of that, there was just so much super high frequency and ultra high frequency information coming that was just kind of like a blanketing, almost like an ultrasonic bath. And it was just terrible. So just to add more detail, I was using the long arm with the MC3 cartridge, the Benz MC3 cartridge, and going through to the step-up transformer, which I have rewired with silver recently, and that was going into the violin. And with that cartridge, there was just so much ultra-high frequency information that it was like turning on my ultrasonic bath, almost that level. And then I just started dropping off the high frequency response. So when I go to my speakers, I can adjust the EQ here. As you can see, if I am going with the terminal right here, that's 0 dB, minus 2 dB, minus 4 dB, and we can go down to, this is about minus 12 dB. There's a sudden jump. I added this because there are some recordings, and not just LPs, but I'm talking about 80s music, where the, I almost said a very pejorative word, starting with bass and ending on starts. So certain engineers with a persuasion towards atrociously perverted taste of really high frequency imbalance. So they have mastered many of recordings with incredibly overloading the high frequencies. And like if you have Madonna's Like a Virgin or Like a Prayer, just do yourself a service, minus 12 dB for the high frequencies. And of course you are going to say goodbye to the 80s sound, that sound signature, but miracles behold, your Madonna albums will sound as if she is at a live concert and her vocals are not processed anymore. So, long story short, I dropped back the EQ minus 4 dB on that almost World War II era EQ curve, and even then it was too much on the high frequencies. So I flipped over to the Sony Pickup Artist arm, PUA arm, with the Audio-Technica ATF7 cartridge, and then a lot of that ultrasonic high frequency information just was gone. And I clearly heard that the frequency extension was just diminished to a great degree, and I even had to adjust it back to 0 dB. So then with 0 dB, that curve, it was playing all right, but around 17 kilohertz, I noticed that there's like a harsh presence there. And I was wondering about that, and I had a really curious feeling, because it told me that this recording really does have that sonic signature that the old Decca FFRR records had, because the Decca FFRR cutter heads, they had a limited high frequency range, and at around 17 kilohertz they had a resonance. So that's where the stylus, the cutter head resonated, if you had those frequencies and higher frequencies. And of course that explains why there was so much of that ultra high frequency material, because this album contains a lot of very high frequencies. So just looking at these three albums, but other Vangelis albums as well, Vangelis uses such instruments and these computer generated and keyboard sounds have incredible frequency extension that it naturally reaches into the ultrasonic range. And those of us who can hear it and who have stereo systems that can reproduce it, it's an astonishing experience to have this that perceive that part of the sonic universe, that ultra high clarity, ultra high frequency. And with Vangelis, it's not just a frequency extension that audiophiles talk about, but a clarity, a transmittal of energy. I really have trouble putting it into words. But if you have a stereo system that is capable of having extreme energy delivery, precision and clarity around the 20 kilohertz range and extending above, then it will be a speechless universe for you to experience these Vangelis albums. However, not in the case of this, and I was very surprised what's happening. And my surprise, I had my hunch, and my hunch was correct. I just completely forgotten about it. That look at that, this is not an original UK pressing, but look, manufactured under license from Polydor International GmbH by RTB Records, Yugoslavia. Yeah. So and you look at the price tag, it says 450, and that's in forints. They bought this record in Hungary, in Budapest, and of course in the 80s and 90s, the big hit in Hungary was to get the Yugo reissues, the bootleg Yugo records, and this is one of those. And that price tag here, this is about $2 or $3 US back in that time. Of course, it was still a lot of money. You know, like Eastern Europe, that was like a crazy amount of money. But just a fraction of the price of the real UK pressing, which was often not just a question of it being very expensive, but unattainable as well. You couldn't get anything, just the Yugo pressings or East German pressings, which were like quite a bit better, but more expensive. So then I think the mystery is solved, and this explains the unusual EQ curve, because I suspect that this Yugoslavian company who pressed it, all they could afford was to get the discarded Decca FFRR cutter heads, which Decca wasn't using anymore, and retired them, and they got it. You know, that was the thing with the Eastern Bloc back before the 80s, and in the 80s, we are still talking about the 80s here, 83, in this era, really, in the eastern part of Europe, there was very, very little money at all available for recreation. Literally every penny went into just, you know, getting food on the table and having a roof over your head. That's it. So I'm not trashing the Yugoslavian companies for making these records, because even though there were problems with this issue or reissue or bootleg, however we want to call it, but the truth is that this was the only way that most of us who were born or who lived in the Eastern European bloc had access to the music which was issued in the West. And this is being one of them. And now that I have a revealing system, now I can tell that what was exactly the problem with these Yugo reissues. Because at that time, we just took it for granted that, oh, you have this new Vangelis album, yeah, you got it, can I listen to it? Sure, I let you borrow it. And, oh, it's a Yugo pressing, no, thank you. And that was because they just sounded generally much inferior to other pressings. And now I realized why. And the reason is because they used the Decca FFRR system or something similar to it, and they didn't use the RIAA or the RIA curve, but they used something, a much more ancient curve. Probably that was the recording system, and that they had there. So fair play, and I have to add that Decca FFRR doesn't cause a problem with just about 98% of even the most revealing audiophile systems, because 98% of the loudspeakers out there are unable to reproduce the very high frequency range with enough precision, coherence, and energy delivery capability for people to hear that FFRR distortion. And this is something that when I learned during my audio journey, there's Terry, he is my vinyl mentor who taught me, who guides me in vinyl appreciation about pressings and issues and how to navigate in the world of vinyl. And he told me first about the London FFRR. And that time, even though I was using really speakers, which most people find it truly superb who listen to it, which were the Lancer speakers, and they use the university drivers, and those are coaxial horns. And I thought that they have outstanding high frequency response, and according to its brochure, it is rated to 23 kilohertz. Now, when I look at these Altex, the 288s, they are rated to 17.5 kilohertz, but they ate that 23 kilohertz extension for breakfast. And I never ever heard any other tweeter technology, even if it claims to go to 40 kilohertz, which had even the fraction of the high energy, clarity and delivery that these guys can do. And the reason for that is that when there is a frequency response measurement on paper, they just give you the curve that they measure a sine wave and then see when that sine wave starts to lose dB from its height, and when it starts to clip, and at a certain point of clipping, it is decided that that's the peak of extension. But there is no measurement that shows whether that wave is reproduced accurately or not. And it is my experience that drivers who claim to have very high frequency extension, they are unable to reproduce that region in a controlled manner, and they don't have the energy delivery at those high frequencies. Most systems, the energy delivery stops at 15 kilohertz. And if you have Vangelis, the Vangelis albums do have material on it that extend to the ultrasonic range. And for those of you who think that, LPs do not hold that sort of information, just for everyone's information, the modern cutter heads that we use, they, or not we, but these companies use, they extend up to 50, that is 50 kilohertz. And they do that correctly, because when you think about digital, then in that ultrasonic range we have tremendous issues due to the brick wall filtering and all kinds of nasties which are caused as the frequency of the sound that we are trying to digitize, it nears the limits of the digital system. Geez, it's already 20 minutes and I barely started to talk about these records. So thank you for tuning in, and I will continue my spiraling short story from here, or maybe not. I'm getting tired too. So thank you. Please like if you like, subscribe if you dare, and bye bye.